I'm Liam, I'm a PhD student here at Swansea University. I also actually did my undergraduate here as well, so I've been here for quite a while now. Emma is also another PhD student in the computer science department. We're both members of the Fit Lab, which, as Simon said earlier, the Future Interaction Technology Lab. You may have all heard of it already. We're both kind of in the same session here, so we're both going to give really quick 5 minutes of thoughts on our research, the kind of things we could do really if you stayed on at university and did research. Okay. So yeah, as soon as I finish my talk, then anybody can talk a bit about their research. So the title of my PhD is kind of a bit of a work in progress, but at the moment I'm calling it Performative, Extravagant, Expressive, Place-Based Services. And so, okay, what does that mean? Well, when you think of performance as, I guess, as an undergraduate student in computer science, I probably would have thought the same thing. When someone says performance in computer science, you think of like speed or something, you know, how well does it perform? And that's not really the kind of performance that I'm talking about. I'm talking about like theatrical performance. So kind of to explain how that ties into technology. A few of you may have heard of Imogen Heap before. So she is kind of an artist and producer, and she actually has this really cool system where she has these electronic gloves, and the gloves know the kind of gestures she's doing, and then that makes sound on the fly, and that's kind of a bit of a performance. She's on the stage, she's controlling this technology, and it has some kind of output. I actually have a short clip.
So this is notes mode.
It actually shows how it works.
Access the pitch bend, or filters, or doing this with a puppet hand. And also, take my voice, put it over there.
Okay, so you get the point. So it's kind of
so I change the filter here, stop it, and then it goes up. There you
go. So there's loads of things you can do with that system, like it goes on forever. But that was an example of a really sort of expressive, performative system. So she was being really expressive. Her inputs were kind of really amplified, and the output was also obviously amplified, you could say. I guess, yeah, so the main motivation of my research is how can we develop these kind of exciting, performative and expressive computing systems that people can use when they're out and about. I guess my motivation then behind that is because if you're out and about right now and you're using your map services, or you go to maybe a visitor centre or something, they're always the same kind of application where you plug in your headphones, you go for a walk around and you just look at the screen, and you're really kind of detached from the real world. You're detached from the people you're with and the environment. So I'm trying to build systems where people can be expressive, sort of talk to each other, and people can see what everyone else is doing, kind of connect to the place. There's lots of different kinds of performative experiences. So I guess the four main ones you could really categorize it as, depending on the different level of the input and the output, whether it's hidden or amplified, you can go from secretive to expressive, and then you have hidden manipulations and amplified output, then you have magical, and then the other way around, suspenseful. So you can't really see, you can see what the person's doing, but you can't hear the output. That would be the same as Imogen just like moving around like that and looking a bit weird, and you can't hear the output. So as I said, I only have a few minutes, so I'm going to talk about one particular experience that I've built. So I've actually built different kinds of audio, visual, and further experiences then where you can sort of tie these together and guide people around, direct them around public places, sort of make their journey a bit more exciting. The project I'm going to talk about is the visual one. So I guess many of you have probably visited visitor centres before that have their own kind of mobile applications. You go around, you might see QR codes or something, and the usual way in which you kind of interact with these is you'll just scan the QR code, and then it'll pop up with a bit of text information, maybe some pictures on the screen. And then I guess that's okay, like it gives you the information, but it's not very exciting, it's not very playful or performative. So how can we make this more performative? The system that I built allows you to, as actually as Simon was saying earlier, it allows you to like appropriate these codes. So the codes already exist, we just reuse the codes, but when the person scans it, it gives them a little bit of information similar to before. And connected to this device is actually a pico projector. So you can't see it very well, but in this top left image you can kind of see the back of it. So it's just a little mini projector that fits underneath your mobile device. You connect it in, acts as a further screen. So what the system allows you to do is you scan these codes, it gives you kind of the same information as before, and then it actually tells you to perform with what is projected. So in this particular case it says, with lots of fruit and nectar, the sunbird is well suited to the South African fynbos. And then it says here, please focus the projected target on the white wall by the decking. So the person looks around, they see that, and then they project it on the wall. And then the idea is, when they're actually projecting, you can see here that it projects a sunbird, and then the user, it just basically allows the user of the system to perform, to become a performer, so that they're projecting on the wall, and then you can see a bird kind of flying around. It kind of comes to life, makes it a little bit more exciting. And then coming back to my motivation, really, the idea is to get people to collaborate, to work together, to kind of, that's pretty much it, really. One finding from this study, so what we did was we compared that text approach, the first one that you saw, with this projection approach. And we observed people at the National Botanic Garden of Wales, and we got them to fill in all kinds of surveys and things when they used both different groups of people using different systems. And we found that with this projection system, people even like strangers, were much more engaging with each other. So you pretend that I was walking around the gardens and I was using this. So I had projections of the birds, I had projections of other processes. Actually, I have some more folders here. So lots of things like widgety grab, fire in the Australian part, the rainforest, you have water up there, so raindrops coming down. Yeah, so what we found was that when people use these projections, people were much more talkative. Strangers came together and they were talking and said, can we follow you around? Can we see what you're doing? Whereas when people were using the text-only system, it was, again, a really sort of private interaction. Nobody came up to anyone and said, like, oh, can I read the information on your phone? It didn't... it wasn't so welcoming, and people had a much more solitary experience. So just quickly to conclude, I have many other systems. As I said, I have an audio system and a guiding system, and many other systems that kind of bring this whole performative theory together. But the idea is I'm building expressive systems with amplified manipulations and effects. I guess they're kind of exciting to use, and users are given the ability to become part of a performance, and they are the centre of what is going on. They can control the input and the output to whatever they want. And the whole idea of it is to engage everybody and to encourage discussion and reflection. Okay, thank you for listening. I'm just going to hand you over to
I'm Emma, and I'm also a researcher in the Fit Labs department. I've done my undergrad and my master's, both with Matt, and now doing my PhD and nearly finishing. So I'm actually working on a project with 6 other universities within the UK looking at the same sort of research that I am, but they're also from completely different backgrounds. So some are from architecture, some are from design, and some are from psychology. We also have some archaeologists as well. So the project that I'm actually working on is looking at different research spaces. So we perform research in many different places. We perform it on a train, when we go to a conference, or when we're going to a meeting. We also might prefer to work at home some days. We go to the library, and also in the setting of archaeology, you're out in the field, you're digging, you're uncovering finds. So these are all different situations. You're performing research and you're making notes all the time. So the idea is, how can you bring digital technology into this research settings in a way that you can also still carry on performing your research, still reading your books, but also have this digital space with you whilst you're carrying out research. So the title for my thesis so far is lightweight and subtle interactions that enable the researcher to focus and remain focused with the task at hand, but also having access to this digital information when they need it. Okay, so the first setting that I looked at was reading research papers. So at the moment, maybe if you're reading a research paper on the Kindle, it sort of promotes sort of a comfortable, natural style interaction that is similar to paper. But when you're faced with the task of copying content or searching on Google, you have to go to these buttons and click them, select them, copy and paste them into the browser. So you're literally taken away from the research paper that you're reading into the browser, and you're drawn away from the document and the research paper that you're reading. So what I would like to look at is ways of keeping people engaged with the content that they're reading, but also perform different tasks whilst doing that. The first sort of design and intervention that I thought about doing was being able to have an interaction style that you can pick up content from the document and place it around the document. So you can place it in different locations, and depending on where you place it, it performs a different function. So instead of copy and pasting it into the browser, you copy and paste it into a space. So it's a visible space that performs the search for you. And then, so once it's performed the search, it will give you some sort of lightweight feedback. So either a vibration can indicate something, or an LED could indicate something. So maybe you picked up a research paper with a reference. Maybe you picked up a reference, and you can search that on Google, and then it will tell you how many maybe citations that has, either through the intensity of the haptic feedback or through LEDs. So this is the sort of thing that I was exploring in this first design. So just a scenario is, so Sam may be sitting on a train, he comes across a useful figure that he wants to look at later, so then he picks this up and places it onto this clipboard so he can look at it later. So the device on his wrist vibrates to indicate that it's been added to the clipboard, giving the feedback to the user that that's happened. And then maybe later he comes across a page that maybe there's something that's useful for him on the page, and his wrist device vibrates, and then he looks down the page and he sees an interesting reference that could be useful for his research, so then he can also add that to the clipboard as well. So then also he might come across this term called tangible reading, and he might think, oh, this is an interesting topic. Can I search this on Google? Is there some research papers related to this? And can I get those? Okay, so this is the scenario that I was looking at. So in the system that I built, you have a shake device which has sensors inside and detects when you place content to the left, which can add it to a clipboard. And then if you pick up content from the tablet and place it to the right, it performs a search. So just for the first sort of prototype, we looked at having LED feedback on the top of the document, which in future could be on the bracelet, just to give you some more feedback. So we looked at performing a search on Google, whether there was a Wikipedia article about it, and whether there are research documents that you could read later. So once we built this system, we thought, well, how do we evaluate this, and how can we understand what researchers actually want? So we can design these systems, but we actually have no idea of the use of them and how people would use them. So I performed a study with 22 researchers from all different departments, and they performed 6 tasks, doing quite simple things of picking up and placing content to either side. And then, whilst doing this, we're engaging in discussion about the useful feedback that the search is performing, and also the interaction style. So, on one hand, I was looking at whether this pick up and place style of interaction was was useful, whether they were able to actually still carry on reading whilst performing these tasks, and how distracting this LED or haptic feedback would be. So the feedback that I got was really positive, and they liked the idea of being able to pick it up and put it to the side, so you could simply just make a note by simply placing it to the right, and they liked the idea that you could just quickly make a note and just carry on reading. So whilst performing this, the tablet and the bracelet were also logging all these interactions. So I had a lot of data about how the time, haven't got the data here, but the time in which to pick up and place content and perform searches was very small, and it was very quick to do. And then we also got, on the other hand, some feedback about what people would want to do. So if they pick up content, so maybe they picked up the tangible reading term and they placed it, they want to know, have they already read some papers on these things? Have particular things, but also if they picked up a reference, they want to know how many citations it has. So a quick way to say this paper is heavily cited would be useful to a reader whilst they're reading. So an idea would be that you pick it up, pick the reference up, perform a search, say it's highly cited, you should read it maybe, and then you can quickly place it into your notes to look at later. So maybe just to summarise, I've done a lot of different tools for researchers in completely different settings, and the idea is that I'd look at designing tools for researchers in different settings to get some overarching themes about tools and what researchers would want. So I looked at an archaeology setting, I've looked at discussion-based settings, which some people in here might have been involved with, and then I also did sort of like a tangible tool which you can quickly make notes and make video notes. So if you have any questions about all the other